Hello everybody, let's talk about wood. Welcome back to the Cave family. Today I'm going to share with you 4 ways to make a wood effect for your builds ranging from simplest to highest detail. You will of course need some XPS foam, and I'm just going to use these pieces of scrap for this demonstration. This will be the simplest approach to getting the wood effect. You will need a good sharp knife, of course some XPS foam. Please use PPE. This is a cut resistant glove. If you're using a knife, please wear the glove. And for all of the approaches, you'll need the steel wire brush to get the wood grain texture. If you wanted to be more accurate with the width of your boards, you'll want your carpenter's square as well. And then maybe you would set this at a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch or however wide you'd like. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to go with sort of semi-random widths on my boards. So imagine this is a wall or a floor or even a ceiling. I just need a surface of wood boards that's been constructed for something. And I'm just going to take my knife and put in some very shallow cuts into the foam. I'm intentionally randomizing the widths of these. I'm thinking of something, a little rustic. So you'll have something like this. My apologies, I did forget to mention you'll also need some sort of a heat tool. A hair dryer may work if you can get a high heat out of it. I'm going to use the heat to just open these lines up a little bit. I don't want to melt the foam. I want to be careful not to do that. So I'm just going to come in a little close and keep moving and quickly open up these lines. And just like that, I've just opened those up a little bit with some heat. Next, I'll come in with my steel wire brush to lay in the wood texture. And as I've said before, you don't want to come into the foam at a 90-degree angle like so. You want to lay the brush almost flat on the foam. And I put a little pressure using this part of my hand onto the wires as I pull them across the foam, sort of dragging them, giving a little pressure as I go, and just pull it across until I get the wood grain I like. The more of this you do, the more weathered it will be. You may even want to sort of dig out a chunk a little bit to really cause some breaking or weathering in there, but this is what we have, our wood grain texture in there. Approach number 2. This is very similar to the first one, except that instead of using a knife and a cutting glove, I'm going to use my Proxxon hot wire cutter, or you could use any hot wire cutter. But I'm going to do the same thing, cutting those lines like I did, but I don't need a knife. I don't run the risk of cutting myself. And of course, I love my Proxxon. I love my Proxxon. So in this case, I'm going to set my fence to the depth of the first board that I want. I'll turn my Proxxon on. I'll keep the heat all the way down. And again, I'm just making shallow cuts into the foam. Once again, I could use my carpenter's square to set board widths accurately, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, whatever. But as I did the first time, I'm just going to go random with this. So I will just put a shallow cut. I'll move the fence out a little bit, put another little cut, move the fence out a little bit, put another little cut. This is quicker than the knife, much more accurate if you really do want to measure the boards and keep them the same widths. And we have that. I will once again quickly open those lines up a little bit with my heat tool and then lay in my wood texture with my steel wire brush. So, this is what happens when you don't angle the brush enough, but that's okay. It'll look like very weathered, damaged wood. Sometimes that effect is desirable. I especially like really weathered, aged-looking things. So there is number 2. Again, not so unlike number 1. Pretty much the same exact approach, except instead of a knife, I used my hot wire cutter. The thing with that is, though, I am limited to 5-inch lengths in my boards, because that's the maximum between the base, the table top, and the arm where the wire connects. Number 3. Again, I will be using my hot wire cutter for this approach and for the last one as well. I will go in once again and cut all those lines with the hot wire. Very low temperature, very shallow lines. And then I will lay in my wood texture. So I have this. I'm going to set the fence of my hot wire cutter very shallow, and I will take that face that I just textured against the fence, pull it through like so. And then what I've done is I have just sliced all of these off, and I have created all of these individual boards, just like that. And what I would do next in this approach is to glue them all right back on to whatever piece I'm putting the wood onto. I know this may seem redundant. I cut them off just to glue them back on again. But what this does is gives you a lot more control. I can put added space between the boards so that, you know, from expansion and contraction over time, there's been gaps there. And frankly, at the end of the day, boards that have been cut and reattached just look more realistic. This creates a much more realistic look than the first two approaches. You're able to have a lot more control and create a more genuine looking piece of timber. The trade-off is the benefit of realism, but it does take more time. So we have something like that. Number 4. For this approach, the first step will be to lay in my wood grain texture with the steel wire brush. So I start with that. Next, I'll move once again to the Proxxon. I'll set my fence to the depth that I want those boards to be. And then I'll slice off that whole textured face like I did for number 3. So now I have this thin piece with my texture on it. And then I'm going to go in and set my fence to the depths of the boards that I want. The benefit to this approach is that I can set the boards to the depth that I want, and then they will all be the exact same width when I cut them. So I take that piece and I just start slicing off boards. So I have my pile of forbidden French fries here, and just like last time, I will now go back in and glue these back on. As far as detail is concerned, there's not that much difference between method 3 and method 4, only that you have an increase in control with number 4, and it's somewhat more time-saving as you don't have to keep adjusting your fence depth. Set it once and be done. I am asked all the time if the hot glue melts the foam. If I stick the tip of this glue gun onto the foam and set it there, it will melt the foam. But I am using a low temp glue gun. If you don't have a low temp, then just move really fast, but I never have a problem with melting foam. What's nice about this too is if there was any accidental patterns when I created the wood texture, I've mixed the order of these boards up now so those patterns won't line up, so it will look more realistic as well. And there it is. Here are my 4 pieces. I'm going to get them all painted up like I always do all of my wood. I've shown in the past the paints that I use to create wood effect. I'll go ahead and show you again though. I'm going to begin with my base coat. This is just 2 parts matte Mod Podge to 1 part black acrylic paint all mixed up. Everybody uses this stuff. DM Scotty was, I think, the first place I saw it. Jeremy at Black Magic Craft uses it. It's kind of the industry standard. I'm sort of surprised Mod Podge hasn't started making black matte Mod Podge yet, but anyway, somebody maybe needs to send them an email. I use this for all of my base coating. It starts off, this seals and protects the foam and makes it nice and black. It becomes basically, it's like a black primer. You don't need a lot of it. You don't want it thick. You don't want to lose your wood grain detail in it. You spread it on very thin. It looks like it's pretty thick on there probably, but it's not. It's the black paint that makes it look that way. But I have actually pressed it and pushed it and spread it very thin on the piece, as to not lose any of that wood detail. Sometimes people tell me that when they put the base coat on, they lose all that detail. It's just they're laying it on too thick. Just like that. Once those are all completely dry, I like to use the Craft Smart Golden Brown, and I'll just do like an overbrush with this. I don't want to bury that black in this. I just want to probably do about an 80 to 85% coverage. I'm covering the whole thing, but just not densely thick. This will be an overbrush. I have some of my paint there. I take a piece of paper towel, load the brush, pull off most of the paint, and go in and start overbrushing. I don't want to lay a bunch of thick wet paint on here because that will definitely mess it up. This is actually a little thin. I can go a little thicker than that even. But I really want that black to show through a little bit. I'm really using it to sort of like I'm blending paint here on the piece. The black underneath will pull that brown down and toward the gray a bit, because really weathered wood, older wood, is less brown and more gray if you look at it. And that is what I'm going for as far as the color is concerned. And once those are all completely dry, I then go in and use Craft Smart Suede for the dry brush. And I use this same color. Again, it's the Craft Smart Suede. I use that for the dry brush on my wood and my stone and brick and pretty much anything. Rock. It really is a great dry brush color. And this will further pull that brown toward the gray a bit and add that aging effect. This is a dry brush. Load the paint up on the brush, pull most of it off onto a paper towel. I will come back to this little bit here and use it. And it's better to start too dry than not dry enough, for sure, which I'm just a little too dry here. Barely laying any paint on. This is going to be like a 15% coverage maybe. All the preceding layers need to shine through. So I am getting this. You can compare the two here. The non-dry brushed and then the dry brushed. And this is the color palette that I really want. And there they all are. And you may see from this distance that there isn't a dramatic difference in the look of the four different approaches, but the closer you get, the more you see that there is quite a significant difference in them. Another factor to consider is ease. If I need something on the table for my game quickly, that it's number one for sure, or number two even. But if I'm building a piece for a commission or to sell, or even I just want a high detail, high quality look, then I'm definitely going with 3 or 4. In fact, I almost exclusively only ever use 3 and 4. And among those, really 4 is my usual go-to. It really offers the most control. I'll just hold them all closer to the camera so you can maybe see the differences. Here is number 1. Looks great, very clean. And here is number 2. Not so dissimilar to number 1. This is just a little quicker because you can use the Proxxon or the hot wire table. Here's number 3. You begin to see those actually are individual boards as opposed to just being cut into the main block. They look more like boards. You can space them out at various distances. And then here's number 4, the last one. Again, actual boards. The most control offered really for trying to achieve the effect you're going for. And there you have 4 of the ways that I create wood effects for my pieces. There are lots of other ways to do this, lots of other great tutorials out there. If you're ever hungry for more, check out all the channels that I follow on this channel. They are all brilliant creators, crafters, and I promise I won't steer you wrong. I hope that was helpful. I appreciate all of you. Please hit subscribe and the bell and you know all that stuff. I'll be back next week with another craft. If you're also hungry for more of what I'm doing, check out the Cave of Crafting on TikTok. I post there pretty much daily. I love you all and appreciate you. Thank you. We'll see you next time.